There's a man you know. You might work with him. You might see him in the mirror. He has done the work. He wakes before the sun. His body is lean, functional, earned through years of showing up when he did not feel like it. His finances are moving in the right direction. His routines are clean. His mornings have structure. His evenings have purpose. He reads. He trains. He builds. By every metric the modern world offers, this man is winning. And yet, there is a frequency he cannot tune out. Not anxiety. He knows what anxiety feels like, and this is not it, not depression. He has energy, drive, forward motion. This is something else, something quieter, a hollow signal beneath the surface of his optimized life, like a room that echoes slightly no matter how much furniture you put in it. He notices it in the gap between finishing one task and starting the next. He notices it on Sunday evenings when the structure loosens and the silence gets a little too wide. He notices it at 3 in the morning when he wakes for no reason, and the house is dark and still, and something in him is asking a question he cannot quite hear. He does not talk about this. He would not know what to call it. If pressed, he would say he needs a new goal, a harder challenge, something bigger to chase. He would frame it as restlessness, as ambition not yet aimed at the right target, because that framing keeps him safe. That framing keeps the signal categorized inside a world he understands, the world of effort, output, and measurable progress. But you know and I know that this is not restlessness. This is not the itch of unmet ambition. This is the sound of a man who has built everything around him and forgotten to build anything inside him. This is the sound of a life that functions perfectly and means almost nothing. And the reason he will not name it is because the only honest name for what he is feeling points toward a territory he has been trained to avoid. He has been trained to call that territory soft, unserious, something for people who cannot handle the real world. He is wrong, and somewhere beneath the routines and the discipline and the forward motion, he already knows he is wrong. Here is the cultural moment this man is standing in. The religion of his father or his grandfather, the one with the building and the rituals and the authority structure, he has already left it. Maybe quietly, maybe loudly. Maybe he never entered it at all. Either way, it does not hold him. The language does not land. The framework feels inherited rather than chosen, and he's the kind of man who does not live inside structures he did not choose. So that door is closed. And the only other door he has been shown is the one with the crystals and the sage bundles and the Instagram mystic telling him to raise his vibration and manifest abundance. The one where a man who discovered consciousness on a beach in Thailand wants to sell him a 12-week course on awakening. The one where meditation has been repackaged as a productivity hack and presence has been turned into a metric you track on your phone. He cannot take that seriously, and he should not take it seriously, because most of it is not serious. Most of it is commerce wearing the mask of depth. So he is left with nothing. The old structure does not fit. The new performance disgusts him. And because those appear to be the only two options, he closes the entire category, files it under unnecessary, moves on, builds another routine, sets another goal, optimizes another system. And the hollow frequency keeps playing. This is the gap. An entire generation of disciplined, capable, grounded men who have closed the door in the deepest dimension of their own existence, not because they examined it and found it empty, but because the only versions of it they were offered were either inherited dogma or commercialized nonsense. They threw out the question because they could not respect the answers they had been given. Think of it this way. A man builds his shelter so tight, so well engineered, so perfectly sealed against the elements that he can no longer see the sky. Every wall serves a function. Every beam bears weight. The structure is impressive, but he has not been outside in years. He has forgotten what the air tastes like when there is nothing between him and the horizon. He has forgotten what it feels like to stand in the open, exposed with no roof and no walls and nothing to optimize. He has forgotten what it means to be in the wild. And the wild is where the realest things live. Let me say this plainly before we go any further. This is not about belief. I am not going to ask you to believe anything, not in a God, not in a universe that cares about you, not in energy fields or higher selves or cosmic plans. If you believe those things, fine. If you do not, fine. That is not where we are going. The trap, the thing that keeps serious men away from this entire territory, is the assumption that spiritual means supernatural, that engaging with the deeper dimensions of existence requires you to accept claims about reality that your rational mind cannot support, that you have to choose. Either you are a clear-eyed realist who deals with the world as it is, or you are a spiritual person who deals with the world as you wish it were. That framing is the prison, not because one side is right and the other is wrong, but because the framing itself is false. It is a binary that does not exist outside the arguments people have about it. The spiritual impulse, the real one, underneath all the decoration and all the commerce and all the institutional baggage, is not about belief. It is about attention. It is the willingness to notice what is already present without reaching for a system to explain it away. You are conscious. Right now. Reading these words, hearing this voice, aware that you are aware, and no one, no scientist, no philosopher, no mystic, no theologian can tell you why, not how. Why? The fact that anything exists at all, that matter somehow became aware of itself, that you are sitting inside a body on a rock hurtling through space, and you can feel the weight of your own aliveness. This is not a belief. This is the most basic observation available to you, and most men have trained themselves to walk past it every single day without pausing. The spiritual impulse is the refusal to walk past it. That is all. The clearing. Strip every decoration from it. Remove the incense and the chanting and the robes and the retreats. Remove the books and the podcasts and the gurus and the frameworks. Remove the word spiritual itself, if it helps. What is left? What is left is a clearing, an open space where a man stands without a system between him and what is real. The clearing is the capacity to be struck by existence, not to understand it, not to categorize it, not to turn it into a practice with measurable outcomes, just to be struck by it, to feel the weight of the fact that you are alive and that this will end and that right now, in this moment, you are here. The man who has stood in the clearing does not talk about it much. He does not post about it. He does not build an identity around it. But something in him is different. There is a depth behind his eyes that you cannot quite name, a steadiness that does not come from discipline alone. He has seen something, not with special vision, not through a mystical lens. He has simply been willing to see what was already there in light that was already shining without shielding his eyes. This is the fire, not the fire a man builds. The controlled, useful, domesticated fire of productivity and goal setting and measurable progress. The other fire, the one that was already burning before he arrived. The one that illuminates not by making things easier, but by making things visible. And what it makes visible is not always comfortable. It shows you the scale of what you are inside of. It shows you how brief your time is. It shows you that the life you have been building so carefully is a temporary structure on borrowed ground. Most men shield their eyes from this fire, not because they are cowards, because they were never told that looking into it is an option. They were told to build, to achieve, to optimize, to produce. They were told that the fire is a distraction from the real work, and so they turned away and built their shelters and sealed the windows and wondered in the dark hours why everything functions but nothing burns. Now, before this goes any further, I need to earn your trust on something. Because if you are the kind of man I think you are, your skepticism is already engaged. You are waiting for the pivot, waiting for me to tell you to meditate for 20 minutes a day, or to start journaling about your inner child, or to attend a breathwork session that costs $300 and takes place in a converted warehouse with exposed brick and ambient music. I am not going to do that. Because here is what you already know. The modern spiritual marketplace is not the wilderness. It is another shelter, a more expensive one, with better lighting and a curated aesthetic, but a shelter nonetheless, built on top of the very impulse it claims to serve. Not the incense, not the crystals, not the silent retreat that costs $4,000 and serves plant-based meals on handmade ceramics. Not the podcast guru who discovered consciousness in Bali and came home to sell a course on it. Not the bastardized meditation repackaged as a cognitive enhancement tool, stripped of every dimension that made it meaningful and rebuilt as a performance supplement. Not the manifestation industry that took the deepest human longing, the desire for meaning, and turned it into a technique for getting a better parking spot. Not the breathwork, the sound baths, the cacao ceremonies, the men's circles that charge admission for permission to feel. Not any of it. These are not the wild. They are shelters dressed up as wilderness, structures built by people who sensed the clearing and immediately started selling maps to it, and the maps are always more comfortable than the territory. That is the point. That is the product. Comfort disguised as depth. The real thing is simpler than all of that, and infinitely harder. Because the real thing has no product, no curriculum, no community with a membership fee, no teacher who has arrived and wants to show you the way. The real thing is just you, standing in the open, with nothing between you and what is real. And the what is real part includes things that a man has every reason to want shelter from. His own mortality, the fragility of everyone he loves, the possibility that there is no grand plan, the certainty that his time is disappearing whether he spends it well or not, the irreducible mystery of the fact that anything exists at all. This is the clearing. It has no walls, no roof, no entrance fee, and most men would rather build another shelter than stand in it for 5 minutes. The depth beneath the surface of your daily life, the routines, the work, the discipline, the targets, the forward motion, there is water, still, dark, deep water, and currents move through it that you have not looked at in years. There are questions down there, not the questions of strategy and execution that fill your waking hours. Older questions, heavier ones. Questions you stopped asking because no one around you was asking them, and you learned early that asking them out loud made you sound like you were losing your grip. What does this actually mean? Not your career, not your trajectory. This, being here, being conscious, being a specific man in a specific body on a specific afternoon that will never come again. What is the difference between being alive and merely not dead? Why does standing alone in a forest at dusk do something to you that you cannot explain and would never admit to another man? Why does holding your child while she sleeps crack something open in your chest that no amount of professional achievement has ever touched? These are not soft questions. I need you to hear that. These are the most demanding questions a man can face, because they have no answers that you can implement, track, or measure. They do not resolve into action items. They sit in the chest like weight. And the man who lets himself feel that weight discovers something that the optimized, productive, goal-oriented version of himself never will. That the weight itself is the point. That the questions are not problems to be solved, but depths to be inhabited. That the current running beneath the surface of his life was carrying him towards something all along, and he has been swimming against it for years because no one told him it was safe to stop. You have been avoiding these questions, not because you are shallow, because you are disciplined, and discipline, misapplied, will seal a man off from his own depth with the same efficiency it uses to build his strength. You have been so busy constructing the surface that you forgot there was an ocean floor. And the ocean floor is where the real things live. Let me bring this closer, because I do not want you to hear this as philosophy. I want you to hear it as memory. You have already been in the clearing. You have already felt the fire. There was a moment, maybe a handful of them scattered across your life, when the shelter cracked open and you saw through it. Not a vision, not a mystical experience, something quieter than that. Something that would sound unremarkable if you described it out loud, which is exactly why you never have. You were standing somewhere high, a mountain, a rooftop, the edge of something, and the view did something to you, not the beauty of it, something behind the beauty, a feeling of scale, of being small inside something so vast that your smallness was not threatening, but clarifying. For a moment, everything you were worried about shrank to its actual size. And what remained was not emptiness, but fullness. A fullness you could not explain and did not try to. Or you were sitting with someone who was dying. Maybe a parent, maybe a friend, and the room changed weight. Everything unnecessary burned off in an instant. Every pretense, every performance, every carefully maintained image. What was left was so raw and so real that it scared you. And in the middle of the fear, there was something else. Something that felt more like truth than anything you had experienced in the ordinary run of your days. Or your child was born, and something inside you rearranged, permanently, silently, in a way that no amount of preparation had prepared you for. A door opened that you did not know existed, and through that door you saw a version of the world that was heavier, more fragile, more beautiful, and more terrifying than the one you had been living in. You have been in the clearing before. You have felt the fire on your face. And every single time you walked back to your shelter, you returned to the routines. You filed the experience under something manageable, a good day, a meaningful moment, a memory, and you moved on. Because you did not have a framework for staying. Because staying felt dangerous. Because the clearing has no walls, and a man without walls feels exposed in a way that no amount of discipline prepares him for. But the clearing did not forget you. The fire did not go out because you walked away. The current beneath the surface did not stop moving because you sealed the floor. These things are still there. They have always been there. They are there right now, beneath the surface of this moment, waiting for a man who is willing to stop building and start standing. Standing without a roof. Here is the part that costs something to hear. Real spiritual engagement, the kind that actually changes the interior of a man's life, is not a practice you add to your morning routine. It is not a framework you adopt. It is not a tradition you join. It is a posture. And the posture is this: standing in the open, without the shelter of dogma, without the comfort of ideology, without the safety net of a label or a pre-packaged answer. It means being willing to not know. That sentence is simple. Living it is the hardest thing most men will ever attempt. Because everything in modern life is engineered to prevent not knowing. Every question has a search result. Every uncertainty has a framework. Every discomfort has an app. The entire architecture of the world you live in is designed to keep you in the shelter, producing, consuming, optimizing, scrolling, so that you never have to stand in the open air long enough to feel the weather. And the weather, if you stand in it long enough, is this: you are alive, and you do not know why. You are conscious, and no one can explain what that means. You love people who will die. You are building things that will not outlast you. The universe is so large that the word large stops functioning, and here you are, in a body, on a Tuesday, capable of feeling all of this and choosing not to. The man who lets himself feel it does not become weaker. This is the lie that keeps men in their shelters. The assumption that exposure to the enormity of existence will somehow soften him, make him less capable, less grounded, less effective in the material world. The opposite is true. The man who has stood in the clearing, who has let the full weight of his own aliveness press down on him without flinching, without escaping into explanation, without reaching for a system that promises to make the weight manageable, that man has a foundation that no external circumstance can shake. Because his foundation is not built on achievement or identity or outcome, it is built on the bedrock of what is actually real. And what is actually real does not change when the market crashes, or the relationship ends, or the diagnosis comes back. This is harder than discipline. Let me say that again, so it lands. This is harder than waking up at 5, harder than training when you do not want to, harder than building a business or enduring a loss or sitting with discomfort. Because all of those things have a metric, a visible proof that you are doing them, a result you can point to and say, "This is what I built with my effort." Standing in the clearing has no metric, no proof, no result you can show anyone. It is a man and the sky and the irreducible fact that he is alive and will not be forever. And most men, even the disciplined ones, especially the disciplined ones, would rather run another mile than sit with that for 10 minutes. Because the mile has a number at the end, and the clearing has nothing at the end except more clearing. Now let me show you what happens when a man refuses this dimension entirely, when he seals every window and lives by the light he built himself. First, he stops wondering. The questions that used to visit him, the ones about meaning, about purpose, about the strange weight of being conscious, they quiet down. He takes this as progress. He calls it focus. He calls it maturity. He has moved past the navel-gazing phase and entered the execution phase. Then he stops feeling the weight of ordinary moments. The sunset becomes scenery. The silence becomes dead air to be filled. His child's laughter becomes background noise in a house that runs on schedule. Not because he does not love his child, because the receptor that translates experience into meaning has been dimmed by disuse. Then he stops noticing that the sky exists. This sounds like metaphor. It is not. There are men who have not looked up, really looked up, not glanced but looked, the way a man looks at something that stuns him in years. The sky is still there. The stars are still there. The stars are still there. The scale of what he is inside of has not changed, but he has pulled the roof so tight over his own perception that none of it reaches him anymore. Then he builds a life so efficient, so optimized, so ruthlessly productive that there is no room left in it for the one question that would have saved him. The cost is not dramatic collapse. Most men who wall off this dimension do not fall apart. They do not have breakdowns or crises that force them into the clearing against their will. The cost is quieter than that. The cost is the slow flattening of everything into function, the gradual replacement of meaning with mechanism, a life that works perfectly and weighs nothing, a man who can do anything and feel almost nothing while doing it. He lives by artificial light. Everything is visible, nothing is illuminated. Everything functions, nothing burns. And he will carry this flatness into his 50s, his 60s, his 70s, and he will not know what he missed until the very end, when the shelter he built so carefully can no longer protect him from the one thing shelters were never designed to keep out: the fact that it is over. Let me return now to the center. Because this is the third pass and it cuts to the bone, you are going to die. Not philosophically, not as a concept you acknowledge and file away. Physically, the body you are sitting in right now, the one reading these words, the one with the hands and the heartbeat and the specific way it feels when you breathe, it will stop. The consciousness that is hearing this will go somewhere or nowhere, and you do not get to know which one in advance. This is not morbid. This is the most clarifying fact available to a living man. And the degree to which you let it reach you, really reach you, not as a slogan but as a felt reality, determines the depth at which you live. The man who has never stood in the clearing, who has never allowed himself to feel the full weight of being alive, will reach the end having optimized a life he never inhabited. He will have built impressive shelters. He will have produced impressive results. He will have maintained impressive discipline. And none of it, not one single piece of it, will mean what it could have meant if he had been willing to stand in the open long enough to feel why it mattered. This is not a luxury for men who have their lives together. This is not something you get to once the important work is done. This is the most urgent dimension of your existence, because the wilderness stretches in every direction. The horizon is real. You are standing in it whether you acknowledge it or not. The only question is whether you will open your eyes. The ancient frequency. Before you dismiss this as modern philosophical navel-gazing, stand here with me for a moment and look backward. The farmer who looked at the sky before planting and felt something he would never be able to explain to his children. He did not call it spiritual. He did not have a practice. He had dirt under his fingernails and a field to tend, and a sky above him so vast that some mornings it pressed the breath out of his chest. And he let it. He did not look away. He did not optimize the feeling. He stood in it, and then he planted his seeds, and the standing and the planting were not separate activities. They were the same life, lived at full depth. The soldier who knelt in the dirt, not because anyone told him to, but because he had seen what a man could lose in a single afternoon, not performance, not religion. The involuntary posture of a man who had been cracked open by reality and found that on his knees was the only honest position available to him. He did not become softer. He became more real, and the men around him could feel it, even if none of them could name what had changed. The father who held his newborn and felt something crack open inside him that no language in any tradition could name, not joy, though there was joy, not fear, though there was fear, something beneath both, a recognition that he was now responsible for a life that was not his own, that the weight of the world had just doubled, and that this doubling was not a burden but a gift so large it terrified him. He stood in the clearing that night. He stood in it holding a 7-pound human being and feeling the fire on his face, and he did not have a word for any of it. This impulse is ancient. It is universal. It has lived in men for as long as men have lived. The warrior and the monk and the builder and the father, they all stood in the same clearing. They all felt the same fire. The only thing that changes across centuries is the degree to which the culture gives a man permission to acknowledge it. And this culture, this specific, modern, hyper-optimized, relentlessly productive culture, is the first in human history to tell men that this dimension does not exist, that the only real things are the things you can measure, that the impulse toward awe is a distraction, that the feeling you get when you stand under the stars and something in your chest opens is just a neurochemical event, interesting perhaps, but not meaningful, not worth building a life around, not worth standing in the cold for. The man who feels this impulse is not regressing. He is not becoming soft. He is not losing his edge. He is hearing a frequency that men have always heard. He has just been taught to call it noise. It is not noise. It is the signal. And the signal is this: you are more than what you produce. You are more than what you achieve. You are more than the sum of your routines and your discipline and your forward motion. There is a dimension of your existence that cannot be optimized, because it is not a system. It is the ground the systems are built on, and the ground is alive, and the ground is asking you to notice it. So what does this actually look like? Not in theory. In a man's life. On a Wednesday. In the middle of the routines and the obligations and the thousand small demands that fill the hours between waking and sleeping. It does not look like adopting a practice. It does not look like buying a book or joining a community or finding a teacher who will show you the way. It does not look like adding another item to the morning routine. Meditate for 10 minutes between the cold shower and the journaling. Optimize the inner life the same way you optimize the outer one. No. It looks like permission. Permission to sit in silence without calling it meditation, without tracking it, without measuring whether you did it right. Just silence. Just you and the room and the hum of the refrigerator and the fact that you are alive in a body that is breathing without your permission. Permission to walk in nature without calling it a wellness protocol, without the podcast in your ears, without the fitness tracker on your wrist, without turning the walk into a vehicle for something else. Just walking, just the ground under your feet and the sky above your head, and the specific way the air smells when it has rained recently. Permission to look at the stars and feel the scale of what you are inside of, and let that feeling stay. Not analyze it, not name it, not Instagram it. Just let it stay. Let it sit in your chest like a coal that glows but does not burn. Notice that the feeling does not make you weaker. Notice that it makes everything else, the work, the love, the effort, the struggle, heavier in a way that feels like meaning rather than burden. Permission to ask the unanswerable questions, not to answer them. The man who demands answers to these questions will always end up in someone's shelter buying someone's map. The clearing has no answers. That is what makes it the clearing. But the asking itself changes the shape of the man who asks. The question, why am I here, does not need a resolution. It needs a man who is willing to carry it. And the carrying, the willingness to walk through his days with that question alive in his chest, that is the spiritual life. That is the whole of it. The current beneath the surface. The one you have been swimming against. The one that pulls you toward depth when everything around you is optimized for surface. The man who lets himself sink, not collapse, not drown, but sink deliberately into the depth that has been waiting for him. Discovers something the surface never showed him. The current down there was carrying him all along. Every question he avoided, every moment of awe he dismissed, every experience that cracked him open, and every wall he rebuilt afterward. The current was beneath all of it, moving in one direction, toward depth, toward realness, toward the kind of life that does not just function, but means. He was never lost. He was just swimming in the wrong direction. The fire without a name. Here is where everything converges. Real spirituality for a man does not require a name. It is not a religion. It is not a philosophy. It is not a morning routine or a weekend practice or a community you join or a label you wear. It does not require belief in anything you cannot verify with your own experience. It does not require you to become someone else. It does not ask you to be less disciplined, less rational, less grounded in the world as it is. It asks you to be more grounded, more here, more willing to feel the full weight of the life you are already inside of. It is a posture, standing in the wild, eyes open, no roof, no map, no system between you and what is real. Willing to feel the enormity of your own existence without flinching, without escaping into structures that promise to make the enormity manageable, without reaching for your phone, without building another goal to distract yourself from the fact that you are a conscious being in an incomprehensible universe and you have been given a handful of decades to figure out what that means to you. The fire that illuminates a man's life is not the fire he builds. It is not the fire of ambition or achievement or discipline. Those fires are useful. They are necessary. But they are fires he controls. He chooses the fuel. He manages the flame. He directs the heat toward the things he wants to build. The other fire, the one that was burning before he arrived, the one that will burn after he is gone, that fire is not his to control. It is his to face. And what it illuminates is not his accomplishments or his failures or his plan for the next quarter. It illuminates the fact that he is here, that he is alive, that this moment right now is happening and it will never happen again, and he is either awake to it or he is not. The wilderness is where you stand, not where you go on vacation, not where you retreat when the real world becomes too much. The wilderness is the actual condition of your existence. Vast, uncontrolled, alive with things you cannot predict or manage. You have been building shelters inside it, and the shelters served you. But the shelters are not the whole world. They are a small dry space inside an infinite wet sky, and the sky is where the weather is, and the weather is where the realness is. The water is what runs beneath you, beneath the routines and the disciplines and the carefully maintained surface of your daily life. Currents of meaning, currents of depth, questions that have been waiting for you to stop swimming against them. The depth is not your enemy. The depth is where the things that matter most have always lived. Your love, your grief, your awe, your terror at the beauty of being alive. These things do not live on the surface. They live in the deep. And the man who refuses to dive will spend his entire life floating. The fire is what you see when you stop looking away. The light that has been shining through every crack in every shelter you have ever built. The light that found you on the mountain and in the hospital room and in the nursery at 3 in the morning. The light that does not need you to believe in it. The light that is simply there, illuminating everything, asking nothing except that you open your eyes. 3 systems, 1 truth. The man who stands in the wilderness, who lets himself sink into the water, who faces the fire without shielding his eyes, that man has not escaped the world. He has entered it, fully. For the first time, He has stopped living in the shelter of his own constructions and started living in the actual house of his existence. And that house has no walls. And that is not a design flaw. That is the architecture. This is not soft. This is the hardest thing a man can do. Harder than any physical challenge. Harder than any professional accomplishment. Because every physical challenge has a finish line, and every professional accomplishment has a metric, and this has neither. This is just a man standing in the open, feeling the weight of being alive, and choosing not to look away. The man who does this does not become less effective. He becomes less hollow. The discipline he already has becomes rooted in something deeper than habit. The strength he already carries becomes informed by something larger than willpower. The life he already built becomes inhabited rather than merely maintained. He does not add anything to his routine. He removes the roof. And what comes flooding in is not chaos. It is light. Here is what no one had the honesty to say to you. The spiritual dimension of your life is not a luxury. It is not a supplement. It is not something you earn the right to explore once the real work is done. It is the real work. It has always been the real work. Every meaningful thing you have ever felt, every moment of love, of awe, of grief, of beauty that stopped you in your tracks, came from this dimension. The one you have been calling unnecessary. The one you have been sealing off with productivity and discipline, and the quiet conviction that serious men do not need this. Serious men need this more than anyone. Because a serious man builds seriously, and a man who builds without depth builds structures that function but do not shelter anything worth sheltering. He builds a life that runs like a machine and wonders why it feels like a machine. He builds a career that produces results and wonders why the results feel weightless. He builds a body that performs and wonders why the performance feels like it is happening to someone else. The depth is not the problem. The depth is the solution. You know this. You have always known this. The frequency you have been hearing, the one you could not tune out, the one you kept calling, restlessness, is not a malfunction. It is an invitation, the oldest invitation a man can receive, not to become someone else, not to adopt a philosophy or a practice or a tradition, just to step outside the shelter, just to stand in the open for a moment. Just to feel the weather on your face and the ground under your feet and the enormous, terrifying, beautiful weight of being alive. The clearing has been waiting for you. The fire has been burning whether you looked at it or not. The current has been flowing beneath the surface whether you acknowledged it or not. Nothing needs to be built. Nothing needs to be learned. Nothing needs to be learned. Nothing needs to be purchased or practiced or performed. You just have to stop and stand and look. Tonight, step outside, not to train, not to think, not to plan or solve or optimize or accomplish. Find somewhere you can see the sky. It does not have to be beautiful. It does not have to be beautiful. It does not have to be remote. A backyard, a parking lot, a patch of grass between buildings where the light pollution thins just enough to show you a handful of stars. Stand there. Do not name what you feel. Do not reach for your phone. Do not categorize the experience or evaluate whether you are doing it right. There is no right. There is only standing. There is only the sky. There is only the fact that you are alive beneath it, and that this moment will not come again. Just stand there, in the wild, and notice that you are alive. That is the whole practice. That is the beginning and the end of it. You do not need anything else. You do not need permission from anyone else. You do not need a teacher or a tradition or a community or a book. You need the sky. You need your own 2 feet. You need the willingness to stop building for 60 seconds and remember what you are building inside of. The wilderness is not out there. It is the condition of your existence. You have been standing in it your entire life. Tonight, open your eyes.